All right, let's get into it. Today, we're talking about a story that is, well, a huge cautionary tale for our digital age. It's about a guy who literally built an empire on cruelty, the online crowds that cheered him on, and the one mother who decided she wasn't going to stand for it. This is the story of the rise and the incredible fall of Hunter Moore. So back in 2012, Rolling Stone magazine gave one person this exact title: the most hated man on the internet. Now, for you or me, that would probably be a moment of deep shame, right? But for Hunter Moore, it was like the ultimate compliment. He absolutely loved it. He used it as a marketing slogan. He leaned right into being the villain. And look, this wasn't some persona that the media just made up. That's a direct quote from the man himself. He actually called himself a professional life ruiner. Think about that for a second. He wasn't just trolling. He made destroying people's lives his entire brand, his whole identity. So how in the world does someone earn a reputation like that? Well, let's take a look at what he created. It was a website called isanyoneup.com. And for a few years, it was one of the most toxic, lawless places on the entire internet. The whole site was built on what we now call revenge porn. But honestly, even that term doesn't quite cover the ugliness here. Sure, some photos were sent in by angry ex-partners. But what made this so much worse is that a lot of the material was stolen. I mean, straight up stolen from hacked email accounts. It was a whole different level of violation. And the scale of this thing was just staggering. At its peak, Is Anyone Up was getting 30 million page views every single month. To put that into perspective, this wasn't some fringe site on the dark web. This was a massively popular mainstream hub for public humiliation. And oh yeah, you better believe he was cashing in on it. He ran ads on the site, and at one point he was pulling in up to $13,000 a month. So he wasn't just doing this for kicks, he had found a way to monetize human misery. He turned people's absolute worst moments into his own personal paycheck. And this right here, this shows you the sheer arrogance of the guy. Publicly, he'd say these edgy things, comparing himself to Charles Manson to sound like some kind of outlaw. But the second he got into legal trouble, he'd hide behind the law, claiming his site was just a platform, protected by the same rules as Facebook. It's like he wanted all the infamy of a criminal, but with all the legal immunity of a tech giant. But here's the really scary part. He wasn't doing this alone. He had this massive, cult-like following. He called them his family, who didn't just look at the site. They actively encouraged him. They piled on the victims, who were almost all women, and they just made the harm so much worse. This was more than just one guy. It was a whole culture that supported him. You know, for a while there, it really seemed like Hunter Moore was completely invincible. He laughed at victims, he ignored lawyers, he was famous for being a monster. But everything, and I mean everything, changed when he decided to target the daughter of one specific woman, Charlotte Laws. And this is where our story really gets its hero. So it all kicked off with something that sadly happens all the time. Charlotte's daughter, Kayla, who was trying to make it as an actor, got her email account hacked. At first, she had no idea just how bad it was going to get. But then, the absolute nightmare began. A private, topless photo, and get this, it was a photo Kayla had just taken for herself and had never, ever sent to anyone. It was stolen from her email and posted on isanyoneup.com. This wasn't a breakup gone wrong. This was just pure theft and violation. And see, this is what made Moore's site so uniquely cruel. They didn't just post the picture. They attached her full name, her city, and links to her personal Facebook and Twitter profiles. In an instant, her private life was thrown out there for 30 million people to see. Friends, family, casting directors, everyone. The humiliation was just immediate and totally devastating. So Charlotte Laws immediately jumps into action. She does everything you're supposed to do, right? She calls Moore's, she calls his lawyer, she contacts the web host, Facebook, the local police, everyone. And the response she got? Pretty much nothing. Just a giant shrug from almost everyone. The system just had no idea what to do. And Hunter Moore's response to all this, to the legal threats from a desperate mother, reportedly, it was just 3 letters. LOL. He'd just laugh it off, which only added to this image he had of being completely untouchable, totally above the law. Okay, so when every single door was slammed in her face, and with Moore basically laughing at her, Charlotte Laws realized something huge. If any kind of justice was going to happen, she was going to have to be the one to make it happen. And that's the moment a worried mom turned into a full-blown digital detective. And she put it perfectly herself. She said, "I quickly realized there were no experts. I had no choice but to become the expert." I mean, that just says it all, doesn't it? She wasn't a lawyer or an FBI agent. She was just a mom who refused to let this guy ruin her daughter's life. And so began her own 2-year investigation. And you gotta understand, this was not some quick win. This timeline shows it was a long, hard-fought battle. Over 2 years, Charlotte tracked down and talked to over 40 other victims, building this mountain of evidence. All that pressure eventually led to Moore's selling the site, and most importantly, it got the FBI's attention. Acting on her evidence, they finally closed in, and in 2014, he was indicted. And the stories she uncovered from other victims, they were just heartbreaking. It wasn't just young people caught in a bad moment. We're talking about a teacher who got fired, a blind paraplegic woman, someone whose private post-surgery photos were somehow stolen. It was just pure, targeted cruelty at its absolute worst.
So, bringing this guy down wasn't a simple single event. It was a full-on war, fought on multiple fronts. You could say Charlotte Laws was the general, but she ended up leading this incredible, unlikely coalition to finally take Hunter War off the board.
It was like this amazing team-up. You had Charlotte obviously rallying the victims and building the case. You had the FBI finally stepping in with the official legal power. You had this guy, James McGivney, who actually bought the website from Moore for the sole purpose of shutting it down. And then you even had the hacker group Anonymous, who reportedly went after Moore themselves. It was just this perfect storm of forces all coming together. So the site is gone, Moore is arrested, and now we get to the fallout. What does justice even look like after all that damage? And what's the real legacy of this whole ugly chapter of the internet? In the end, the law did catch up to him. Hunter Moore pled guilty to a couple of federal charges, including identity theft and helping a hacker. He was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. His hacker, a guy named Charles Evans, got a little over 2 years. But was that enough? For a lot of people, the answer was a huge, resounding no. The online reaction was pretty clear. Words like pathetic, a joke, too short, that was the general feeling. I mean, for the hundreds of lives he just casually destroyed, 2.5 years felt like a slap on the wrist. And that really brings us to the big, uncomfortable question we're left with. Okay, so Hunter Moore's website is gone, and he did his time. But what about the millions of people who clicked on his site every month? What about the culture that not only tolerated him, but celebrated him? He might be silenced, but you have to wonder, have the conditions that created him in the first place really gone away?